Welcome to Founders Future, a podcast by Closers.io where we dive into the journeys of innovative entrepreneurs and explore the road ahead for them and their companies. I'm your host, Samuel Kanzam, and in each episode, we'll uncover the stories behind successful startups, the challenges faced along the way, and the strategies driving their future expansion. Today, we're excited to have Alice Heiman, the founder and Chief Sales Energizer at Alice Heiman LLC, as well as the podcast host Sales Talk for CEOs. She will be sharing more about her founding story, as well as giving us a glimpse into her plans for future growth. So let's jump right in. Alice, welcome to Founders Future.
Thanks so much for having me.
So take us back here, almost 30 years at this point in time. Yeah. What specific problem inspired you to start the business?
I call myself an accidental entrepreneur. So this is my second company, and both times I would say that I started a business accidentally, but not really, right? Because no one does that accidentally. It's just that the market forces were propelling me. So in my first company, the things that were happening in that industry at that time just led me to opening a business, and the same thing the second time. So my first business was in education. I was a public educator for 13 years and then had that business, closed it because it was not profitable, and moved on. And I went to work for my father's company, Miller Heiman. So some of Steve Heiman and Bob Miller, who started Miller Heiman many moons ago in the 70s. So I went to work with him to help him grow the company. He had already bought the company out from Bob Miller, and he wanted to grow the company. And unbeknownst to me at the time, wanted to sell it pretty soon. So I actually only worked there for 3 years, but I learned so much in that time. Then once I knew they wanted to sell, I started my own company. So that was around 1997. And they did have a successful exit in 1998, first sales training company ever sold to private equity. So I learned all about how to exit a company in the meanwhile. But of course, if Miller Heiman, that is all about the complex sale, smaller companies selling to really big companies and big companies selling to other big companies. And so I was deeply steeped in the complex sales. So starting my company in 1997, again, accidentally knew they were selling, thought, what am I going to do? I'm not going to stay with the company after they sell and they're gone. So I just became an independent contractor for Miller Heiman, and then started the time of the .coms, if any of you are old enough to remember that. And these senior level people at all of my clients, Hewlett Packard, Fidelity Investments, GE Capital, and other companies like that, were leaving these large companies to go to these .coms. And they were calling me and saying, hey, can you help us? I'm like, what do you need help with? Because Miller Heiman they only sell sales training. And this launched my consulting career. They're like, we need to start up a sales force from scratch. I'm like, okay, I've never done that before either, but I'm sure we can figure it out. And off we ran into the .coms, and I was starting up sales teams from scratch with no prior experience doing it, but they were all business to business complex sales. So I knew what was needed, and we did it. And so that is how my company started. And then from there, I moved on to work with more mature companies, which is what I do now and really love. But I've always been a sales strategist as I do this, right? And working directly with the CEOs.
I love the background. Thank you for that. Specifically for you, walk us through some of the evolutions or changes that the business has gone through during the last really 27 years at this point.
Oh my gosh, so many, really. And I think this is super important because I think sometimes early stage founders, they get product market fit and then they think, okay, we're good, go. But of course, everything's always changing. Our buyers are changing, the market's changing. And so we have to change or die. So we looked at all along the way, every time we had to make a pivot, like what's happening now in the market and what is needed, right? So when I first started, it was the .com thing. And I wasn't really doing a lot of training because when I left Miller Heiman, that IP went with them. I wasn't an independent contractor anymore. Although sometimes I still brought someone in to do the Miller Heiman training if that was appropriate at the time. But we were starting stuff up, right? So we were putting all the process in place and really setting the strategy and making things happen, hiring like crazy, right? And then that bubble burst, right? The .coms, as they say, went .bomb. And that kind of ended. But by that time, I had already started working with some more mature companies and starting to understand what they needed to grow. And in the early days, I did still do some sales training. I developed my own brand of training. I never really marketed it, but I would show up and, oh, we need to learn how to handle objections and we need to learn how to close deals. And so I'd be like, okay, let me put a few slides together and do a training for your salespeople. And then I'll work with the managers to help them coach and manage against what we've learned. And so it went like that for a while. And for many years, I was a sales generalist doing a lot of things in the sales arena for these companies. But I think the best evolution, and actually, I'll back up for a second. In doing that, I thought, well, I'm going to build a firm, right? I'm going to have other people who can do what I do. And they'll also sell and deliver. And just like the Miller Heiman model was, we had all independent contractors that sold and delivered. And I thought I'll even hire a few people and we'll start building this thing and I'll teach them to do what I do. I learned very quickly that my strongest feature was not managing people. My strongest was selling and delivering to the CEOs and their teams. So I dismantled that and kept going. But by that time, I had already really started to niche in. And this is something that I want all founders to think about. A lot of times when we start something, we go very broad, right? And even when we give the advice to narrow, we don't do it because of fear. We're afraid that if we cut anyone out, we won't have enough business. But it's in fact the opposite. When people know what you do, who you do it for, and why, it's so much easier for them to refer you and introduce you to people. So narrow it down. Now, that doesn't mean later you can't open up another vertical. You can, but let's win one first and have that going really well and feeding us before we start another one. So I think that is a mistake people made. I made the same mistake. I was too broad. And so as I decided I'm not going to grow this and have a whole bunch of people working for me, I'm going to do what I do best. I call it working in your genius zone. I talk to leaders about this all the time. When I do what I do best, most of my day, everything else is easy and the customers come very easily and the money flows in very easily. So I think it's an important thing to note. So I didn't grow a big structure around me. I decided to hire people who can do everything else in my business so that I can sell and deliver. And so that was my most recent, I'd say that was before COVID, maybe 8 years ago, really narrowed in on tech CEOs between 10 and 100 million who are at least 10 years in business, so not startups, and who need to exponentially grow their sales because they're thinking about their exit and they want a high valuation. And so that's been my niche now for a long time. However, another evolution is coming. And in 2026, I'm going to be launching a different way to deliver the same content. Instead of in a consulting format, it's going to be in cohorts. And this is not fully baked yet, so I'm not going to tell you too much more, but it's going to be exciting. I'll still be working with tech CEOs, but in a different way.
Very exciting. And you've given some great feedback and advice in there as well, where everything to everyone is really nothing to no one in the world of marketing and finding the right people to work with you. Forbes described you as actually being amongst the world's most leading experts on the complex sale. What would you say is one misconception that people have when it comes to very complex B2B transactions?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, but some companies are still, I should say, many companies are still approaching these B2B complex sale with one salesperson, right? This lone wolf seller to go out there and do this, to do everything. Maybe they have an SDR that's trying to help them book appointments, but basically this one person is to take this sale from beginning to end, maybe bring in a subject matter expert, but not really approaching with a team. Especially when you're a small company selling to a very large company, you need a team. You need to bring that confidence because this great big company is looking at you going, that's a lot of risk for me to buy from them, right? So how do you mitigate that risk? You need a team of very smart people to help you. Not only that, in the complex sale, there are many buyers, right? And when you just have one seller to interface with each of those buyers, that doesn't work. Not only might there just be a personality mismatch at some point, but there's definitely a level mismatch. And so if you have a team of, say, 5, 6, or 8 buyers, you need to bring in like levels to interface with those people and to talk their language, right? So yes, the salesperson still has to guide and orchestrate everything, move through all the steps that the buyer is going to need to take to make a good decision, but they need a team of people that can interface with each of the buyers at the company at the level that they need to be interfaced with. And so I think that is just something that everyone needs to look at. If you're trying to sell to big companies and you're not winning the deals that you want to win, what's the structure of that? Do you have a selling team that can go up against the buying team and really add the value that needs to be added and the confidence to mitigate the risk of that large company buying from you?
Absolutely. And walk us through how the actual business generates revenue today. What is the model and what does that engagement look like for a client of yours?
Yeah, so right now today it's a consulting model. And lucky for me, but not luck because many years of hard work, have created a demand. And I have CEOs who call me and want to talk, and I listen. And a lot of times I talk to them 3 or 4 times before I decide if we're going to do business together. First, I want to be sure it's a good fit for them and that we get along, and I can tell them the hard stuff I'm going to need to tell them and they're not going to shy away from it. So I want to get that fit down. And then I also want to make sure that I can actually help them get there where they want to be. So I need to understand what's happening now, what do they want to be happening that's not happening, what their exit strategy is, right? So I'm going to comb through all of that with them to make sure it's a really good fit for them to work with me. Because then once they say, yes, I definitely want to work with you, they're usually in it for at least a year because we're looking at their entire go-to-market strategy from stem to stern. Now, I am not an expert in everything, nor would I ever even purport to be in any way whatsoever. But because I have been a CEO and I've worked with so many CEOs, I can look at this big picture and see, here's where the problems are. And here's where they need to be fixed. And here's the order in which we should do them so that the spending is under control and that you get the most that you can out of each change that we make. Also thinking about profitability, right? Usually I say, where can we get more revenue the fastest and most profitably? And so we're going to look at that first. And that's generally from your existing customer base, either from them buying more, buying something different, or making an introduction to someone they know in another department or in another company, a company they used to work at, their friends, whatever, making those introductions and speaking really highly, right? And saying, oh, you really need to talk to this person. So I'm going to get them set up to do that first. So then the money's coming in, right? And they can pay the bills. So that's all really good. So what we want to do then is work out a plan over the year's time to get everything in order. Now, there's usually some hiring going on. There's usually sales leaders that may or may not need to be changed out or leveled up. So there may be a marketing leader or not. They may be outsourcing marketing. So we're looking at all of these things to see, how do we create demand? How do we get salespeople to have more conversations with the people who can buy from them? And then how do we navigate these very complex deals? And so we put all that together, and it takes a while. Some of my clients have been with me up to 10 years before they exit. And I've had many successful exits. So it's really fun to be there when the owner sells. Yeah. So that's what happens. They come on, and sometimes we do a short, maybe 3-month project to see how we're going to work together, and then usually continues. And like I said, it's 1 year to 10 years that my CEOs stay with me and that I help them grow their companies.
Walk us through a bit of what that acquisition process looks like. What channels or methods or approaches have you noticed to work best for you?
Yeah, for me, acquiring customers or my customers being acquired.
For you.
Yeah, so the acquisition process is pretty simple. They either see me on LinkedIn, they listen to my podcast, Sales Talk for CEOs, or they see me at an event. Now, I used to do a lot of speaking and I made a good living doing it. But when I narrowed down, I realized I only want to talk to CEOs. So I only speak when there's a group of CEOs sitting in the room. And that's been very advantageous. So when I speak, the topics are highly relevant to the CEO. And afterwards, they want to talk with me. We have a couple phone calls and they hire me. So it's a very simple acquisition process for me. It's not a complex sale because the CEO is going to decide pretty much on their own. If they have a sales leader, I usually meet them before they make a decision because I want to make sure I can work with the other people involved. but it's a pretty quick decision because they're either going to understand what I do quickly and understand how I'm going to do it for them through our conversations, or they're going to say, oh, I'm not ready, or gosh, I need to make a few changes before I can really start working with you. So it's pretty quick and easy because the CEO and I either hit it off and I can explain to them really easily what we're going to do to make the changes and they get it and they hire me, or they don't. And my close rate's over 90%.
Just a little pat on your own back. What would you identify right now as the current bottleneck of the business? Is it around that like lead generation, sales acquisition component, capacity, fulfillment, or something else entirely?
There are obviously capacity issues when you do consulting. If you're not going to hire other consultants, there's only so many hours in a day. And I like to go skiing on a Wednesday, which I did this morning. And I have grandkids that I like to hang out with and kids that I like to hang out with. And so I want to have some time of my own, especially now. There have been times when I worked way too much, but it is a capacity issue for sure. So the other thing is the way I work with my clients, I only take about 6 or 8 at a time. And so that means that I am able to give them my undivided attention. They can reach me on a daily basis. I can Slack them, they can Slack me. I can share resources because it's the right amount for me to be able to manage in that way. I think the bottleneck, of course, to growing any bigger than I am right now is just I don't want to take on more clients than that because I do want to serve them in the way that I'm serving them. Now, that said, my schedule is full every day working with my clients, which is great, but it doesn't allow me the flexibility to do some of the other things that I want to do, some of the learning and thought leadership. So that it's harder for me to get time to do that. I do have teams that help me with a lot of things, but I like to read a lot. And I'm very fascinated with the buyer side research. And I want to take all of what I'm learning and synthesize that and then put messaging back out based on what I've learned. It's hard to have time to do that. And this is why I'm now going to my probably what will be the last evolution of my business with this different model where instead of being embroiled in meetings all day long and trying to get things done and back and forth and everything else, I will be working with people in cohorts, which will allow me to have a lot more time and freedom to be more creative and inventive.
Absolutely. It sounds like really moving to a group model is one of the top priorities moving into 2026.
Yeah.
Excellent. Specifically for you, how have you noticed this industry change over time? And what do you suspect the future will hold for the complex sale in the B2B industry? I know it's a very big question, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
It has changed a lot over time. And I think mostly, unfortunately, to the detriment when my industry is selling, right? It's everything to do with selling, sales, marketing, customer success, and how that happens in the world, especially in a B2B complex sale and specifically in tech, because that is where I really point at tech and innovative. So when I see what's happening, I see that people are still using very old methodologies and old systems and processes to try to win business today. And it just simply isn't working. And everyone's complaining about it, right? Oh, it's gotten so much harder. We can't get anybody on the phone. Our outreach isn't working. We don't have enough of this or that or whatever, right? And so we know that it's not working because we're hearing those complaints constantly. And yet people are doubling down on doing things that don't work. And so that's sad to me. That's why I'm very interested in the buyer side research that like Corporate Visions and Tim Reister are doing, and then Brent Adamson with Q's is doing, and he's been doing research for quite some time. Both of them have, and it's important to understand how our buyers have changed and what it takes today to meet them where they are. So even down to the type of salesperson we're hiring to interface, that has to change, right? And the way that the salespeople interface and the questions that they ask and what salespeople need to learn about group dynamics and decision making and bringing people to consensus. Like we're just not teaching those things. They're not in the programs, the sales programs that are out there today. And size companies I work with, they really don't give their people sales training, right? It's all on the job. So we're way behind in that aspect. The companies that are the large companies who can invest and know the research and are watching and can bring these things in, that's fantastic, but that's not the bulk of the people out there selling, right? And so when I start to look at AI and what's happening with AI and thinking, okay, how is this going to impact go-to-market strategy in many ways, but we have all these laggards who aren't picking up on it. Like, here it is, people. Even if you just used it to do your research, you'd be ahead of the game, right? But everybody's afraid, that their job is going to be replaced with AI. And for some, it absolutely will be replaced with AI. But why not upskill yourself and teach yourself how to use AI so it's your friend, and you can reduce the amount of administrative and mundane work that you do using AI so that you can spend more time with humans doing the things that humans need you to do. So, what does that look like? So, I think, again, we're just so far behind because even though AI is here, it is happening. Take a look at OneMind and what Amanda Callow is doing with Mindy, her superhuman, right? She can outsell most salespeople already. It's there. Now, do humans want to talk to a superhuman AI bot? I don't know. Maybe they do, but I do know in places where it's used for customer service and the AI is better than the human, I definitely want to interface with that, right? So it's here. It's not coming. It's here. And as an industry, sales, customer success, marketing need to learn how to use AI. They need to put process in place, put guidelines in place, choose the right tools, train everybody to use them, and then measure that, right? And make sure it's being done properly. Because as I've been known to say before, and I didn't make this up, someone else did, but a fool with a tool is still a fool. And so if I give a salesperson permission to use ChatGPT to write their emails, and they don't know how to write emails to start with, their emails are still spam. No bueno.
Final question here for you. What would you say is the best piece of advice personally that you've ever received when it comes to the world of business and when it comes to the world of entrepreneurship?
Gosh, best piece of advice. I think that fail fast is probably one of the best things. Figure it out. If it's not working, fail fast. Just don't spin your wheels. And sometimes it's hard to know, right? Maybe if I get a little more effort, but usually if you have smart enough people around you, you can figure out that it's working or it's not working. It's going to make money profitably or it's not. And that's why we're in business. Make money profitably. I'd say take a look at anything that you're doing in your business and ask yourself, why are we doing it? How is it working? Should we keep doing it? And if the answers, aren't what you want them to be, then figure out how to transition out of it or just stop it immediately and do that fast.
Alice, this has been an absolute pleasure. If someone wants to learn more about you, potentially have a conversation with you, or even partner with you or work with you in some way, shape, or form, where should they go?
You can definitely find me on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to connect with you if you let me know that you heard me on this show. And then you can also go to my website, which is aliceheiman.com.
Excellent. To all of our listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to Founders Future wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. You can also find more resources and insights at closers.io, where we're dedicated to helping businesses accelerate their sales through trained sales individuals and world-class marketing systems. Until then, keep climbing, and we'll see you in the next episode.